And I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Joanne Kaufman, Executive Director of the Warehouse District Business Association. Just some housekeeping to get out of the way. You do not have audio or video functions. If you do have questions, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. We'd like to welcome our speakers this afternoon. Joining us is Steve Hark, CEO and founder of the Entourage Events Group. Steve has always been an entrepreneur and designer at heart, so he created a hospitality enterprise, Entourage Events Group, that provides end-to-end, singular, hospitality-driven events and production with a seasoned team of experts and resources. Steve thrives on growing his business in collaboration with his team, clients, and communities. And Steve wants your experience with Entourage Events Group should reflect his passion to deliver the highest level of service and hospitality. And if you've ever attended one of his events, I can tell you that he does deliver on that. From the national, expansive, and complex to bespoke customized weddings, his venues provide the perfect setting for his team to imagine your unique event. And Steve is particularly proud of Entourage's production division, EDG Productions, and its specialty in producing large A-list level events in some of the most unique and historic locations throughout the Twin Cities and across North America. Steve added event production capabilities to the Entourage portfolio as blue chip clients continually asked for more, the experience beyond premium food and beverage hospitality. Steve has his degree in construction engineering from the University of Minnesota. He has been designing and building out well-designed and eye-catching spaces specifically created for hosting events for the last decade. In 2019, he introduced his latest culinary design innovation in a 53-foot, fully decked traveling culinary operation aptly named The Kitchen. This capable kitchen facility allows Entourage to truly provide food and beverage hospitality anywhere in North America. With an eye on continued growth in the hospitality industry, he had the opportunity to acquire Sky Food Catering in early 2019 as an inroad to developing innovative hospitality products and services to the airline industry. With a new team and catering production facility, Hark's Sky Food hospitality team and full-service airline catering operations is navigating 2020 with current clients and is poised for continued growth as the industry reopens into 2021. Also joining us this afternoon is Matt Kucharski. Matt is a seasoned public relations, strategic communication, and marketing professional, helping clients across a wide range of industries build, grow, and protect their brands and reputations. Throughout his nearly 30 years in the field, he has been a continuous trend watcher, learner, educator, and innovator, helping the agency and clients stay ahead of what's next. Matt leads a highly talented and experienced leadership team supporting all of Padilla's offices and brands. In addition, Matt is a sought-after marketing, communication, and business counselor with expertise in branding, corporate communication, reputation management, and crisis and critical issues response. A highly skilled facilitator with a knack for simplifying the complex, Matt has been the driver behind many of the firm's strategic initiatives, including its Padilla Next strategic direction and the creation of Padilla's Purpose to Action, brand and communication planning methodology, which has been successfully executed on hundreds of client engagements. Matt has planned and implemented strategic communications, brand building, and reputation management programs and projects for a wide range of Padilla clients, from Global 500 enterprises to promising category challengers in a range of sectors. Clients benefiting from Matt's experience include Rockwell Automation, Cargill, Mayo Clinic, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, Medtronic, Abbott, Be the Match, Tyco, 3M, Microsoft, Cisco, and numerous others. Thank you both for joining us today, and let's get started.
Our moms wrote those bios, by the way.
They did a brilliant job, too. Let's start first with an overview of options. What do you see in the marketplace that is getting the most buzz for being an overall management tool? And I'll throw it out to whoever wants to get started, and we'll go from here.
Steve, go ahead.
Well, Joanne, I come at this with a hospitality business lens, where the client we serve continue to expect personal, individual, verbal contact, which can be supported by some automated contact, but is primarily personal interaction, where we are either sharing our expertise to help them plan an event. This could be a virtual tour or a virtual meeting with our event team, or we are helping them understand changes in laws and guidelines that it applies to an ever-changing COVID landscape. Either way, this is a private one-to-one conversation that happens on one of the popular chat services app, depending on the client. We're seeing Zoom and Microsoft Teams primarily between business-to-business clients, and FaceTime or Duo or Zoom between business and staff or business and the customers. That's kind of what we're seeing. We're also on G Suite, which just serves our needs very well as a small business. Now, to answer your question in regards to what we see in the marketplace that is getting the most buzz for being an overall management tool, that depends on the size and type of the business you are operating. For practical purposes today, I will approach our conversation with a small to medium size retail business perspective. From that perspective, Google's G Suites provide the right amount of business organization and infrastructure for the team to operate, since across retail there are proprietary industry platforms that do the actual work, which would be different for professional service businesses, as an example.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because there's buzz and there's value, right? We're sitting here on a Zoom call, which is great. But I actually think Zoom is the one that's going to be vulnerable over the next 2 years because it's very standalone. Whereas you look at Teams, its integration with Office, and you look at Slack, which just got bought I think yesterday, announcement of Slack getting bought by Salesforce. So I think the tools like this that are going to be integrated with other tools are the ones that are going to be most successful. So there's the buzz, and like Steve, we're using Teams, we're using Zoom, we're using Google Meetup. We're kind of using WebEx. I mean, it's funny to think about where WebEx is now versus where it was even last year. But then there's all these different sort of under the radar, valuable collaboration and technology tools that have been absolutely essential over the past 10 months. Think about your high-speed internet. And none of this works with the high-speed internet. Think about security. Think about cloud-based storage. If you're a restaurant, think about MenuCalc and Craver and those things that allowed us to digitize menus and allowed us to do e-commerce, electronic payments, telehealth. All of those enabling technologies are really, depending on what vertical you're in, could be in many ways as valuable or more valuable as us being able to chat, via video here.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And so are you using different platforms internally and externally, and different platforms amongst your client base? So I know, Steve, you might have companies that are using one platform and other companies that aren't. I know in dealing with the city of Minneapolis, for example, there are platforms we can't use with them. And so how is that working for you both internally and externally?
This is, go ahead, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah. Joanne, most of the time the client is who sets the meeting or kind of does kind of refer what's their preferred platform, and that's kind of what we follow. We have to be familiarized and trained on almost all the platforms that are very popular today. Internally, we are emailers. Externally, we are emailers too. Of course, we are Zooming and teaming along with everyone else. We are also conducting our marketing and client services virtually at this time. But once the pandemic is passed, we expect this to become a small segment of the work as it was before. Now, a lot of times the platforms don't serve the needs for our clients, specifically when they need to see a space, a physical space, or they need to or taste some food. So those still are required to be in person, executed with all the safe environments of the meeting. The spaces are, we do a lot of FaceTime with our clients that are looking to book a space or host an event at a space. Again, it's always followed up by an in-person meeting, as a lot of times, the video call doesn't do the job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This actually relates to Cindy's question that she popped up on here about, I have Teams, do I need Zoom? We're in a kind of a different situation from the standpoint of we're working with a couple hundred clients. So even though our agency is standardized on Teams, and we do that because we're a Microsoft shop and we're using all the other Microsoft tools, we also use Zoom quite a bit. And there's a couple of reasons for that, is because other shops some of our clients are on Zoom. In addition, it does seem like Zoom has some better functionality for large group meetings. You can
Mhm.
tile many, many, many more people. When Teams first came out, you could only see 6 people at once. And then they upgraded it to 9. And then now they've got this kind of arena sort of setting that's kind of cheesy, but it works. So for large meetings and our big staff meetings, we use Zoom, but our day-to-day we use Teams because of the integration with the Microsoft suite.
Mhm.
And you know, what's interesting is you've got the different platforms, but then you've got variations on the same platform. We've got our Teams channels, and we have clients who say, hey, we'd like to put you on our Teams channel as well. So now I got 4 or 5 different Teams channels that we're managing. So our staff need to be adept at all the different tools because it really depends on what the client's using.
Mhm. And you know, you mentioned the increase in tiles on Teams, and I know that that is a real issue out there, and we're glad to see the change to the arena aspect. What other changes are you seeing as we you know, as we continue on in this virtual business environment that are helpful or not helpful? Are there things that you're still hoping will come?
I have to agree with Matt that Zoom changed the virtual meeting game. Also, I agree with you, Matt, that at the beginning of the shutdown, we as a small business reviewed GoToMeeting and WebEx, which were generally thought to be the market leaders at that time. We soon saw Zoom and Microsoft Teams emerge as the chat service favorites for our business-to-business business segments. And for our customers or business to clients, they simply want their virtual tours to be a live, interactive, walking conversation addressing their specific questions. So that we do that via FaceTime or dual mobile apps, depending on what operating system they're on.
Yeah, it's definitely a case where those two have emerged. And you know, if I'm the product manager for WebEx right now, I'm probably not putting that on my resume. Just because they completely missed the boat, right? But there have been some good upgrades. We mentioned Teams. You know, Teams when Microsoft when the pandemic hit, Teams was sort of like this kind of funky add-on that the rogues in your company were using, and then all of a sudden it became, oh my God, this is the killer app of, if I can use that old phrase, of Microsoft Office. But there's also been some other big changes, much better integration of Teams with the Microsoft suite, to the case where you can review and edit files in Teams much easier than you were able to in the past. That's connected with obviously with SharePoint and Cloud and OneDrive. Don't forget about mobile and the fact that we're trying to get these tools much more enabled on mobile devices. And that was one thing that I was pretty impressed with Teams pretty quickly off, is it felt just like a phone call when I was on mobile.
Yep.
And that was pretty important because, you know, even though we're locked down, we're not that locked down. And again, I can't stress how important it's going to be to have cross-platform integration. And I think some of these collaboration tools that are going to be most successful are the ones that open up their APIs to be able to connect with other types of applications. And be, you know, think about if Zoom really does a nice job of integrating with the G Suite. You know, that could be its saving grace. Or if Salesforce and Slack go beyond just Salesforce and Slack and start connecting some other areas.
And so is that, you know, connectivity, you know, between the platforms, you know, the cross-platform integration, is that kind of some of the dream things you'd like to see in an ideal world as we go on? Are there other things that would be helpful too?
Zoom has a really good but hard to use virtual whiteboarding function. And I do think that we're going to start to see a little bit more of that sort of going off into what, you know, you're having breakout rooms, having the ability to toss up some whiteboarding, some virtual whiteboarding. Heck, the other day I logged on to the same app, the same meeting twice, once from my iPad and once from my computer, so that I could use my iPad in the notes function as a virtual whiteboard. That is the definition of kludging it together.
Yes.
But now you're seeing tools like Miro, M-I-R-O, and others that allow you to do great collaborative virtual whiteboarding, put up sticky notes, work all on the same wall together, and connect that with some of these other things. And then, by the way, convert it to a PDF and share it in the files function on Teams. That's the kind of thing people are going to want to be able to do. If we're going to replicate the true office environment, those kinds of things need to be there.
What, Steve, what about you? Are there things out there that you'd love to see that aren't there yet?
Well, from a technology platform perspective, I don't see any big unmet needs for small to medium-sized retail businesses. There are delivery platforms, restaurant mobile apps, and catering marketplaces as hospitality examples. These were well established prior to the pandemic. What I will say is that there are new consumer behaviors to learn and understand as they use these tech platforms. That is what we continually focus on. How to focus on what our clients and potential customers need today and next in a marketplace landscape that keeps changing. From small to medium-sized businesses, we would like to keep it as simple as possible, as more sophisticated platforms require more training, more investments in our staff. So that's why the simpler it is, the more it gets used by small businesses. It requires a cost / training / education on how to use the platforms. Again, I agree with Matt. There's a lot of great tools that will be available soon. It keeps becoming available every day for us. Not many, I would say, businesses on a small to medium side are taking advantage of that. However, larger firms are.
Yeah, I think what Steve said is super important, though, because keeping it simple is really important. You can be really cool and hip by using some tool that no one's ever heard of. You're also going to be harder to do business with. And the whole idea of these technologies is to make it easier to do business with. So don't pick something just because it's cool and hip. Pick it if it really works for you, and more important than works for you, works for your customers.
And you both bring up a good point, Steve, you talk about some of the delivery platforms, for example, and we've all heard, when it's all at all possible to order directly, do delivery directly through the restaurant, because the cost of doing those, using those platforms is so prohibitive to the restaurants. What do you think about some of the paid versus the free platforms? I mean, we all know Zoom has a limit unless you have a license on the time for people more than 2, and obviously businesses are getting licenses. But what are your thoughts on some of the paid versus the free platforms?
Well, Joanne, the marketing platforms that help you stay connected with your clients or generate new ones are worth paying for. I think we'll all agree we need it more than ever is to reach to a new audience or help the audience reach out to us, specifically hospitality businesses. They're a little bit isolated from the world right now, and any type of connection we can establish, even if it's paid for, it's definitely important and critical. We use MailChimp for our email marketing and client communication efforts. It's a great tool. Leveraging their paid features to maintain and grow our opt-in database is worthwhile. We also use Constant Contact as well. So that's what we have been using recently.
And Matt, what do you think?
This actually relates directly to Bruce's question about, are there levels in Zoom and levels in Teams? There are, and there are free versions of Zoom, and then that allow a limited number of participants, and then there are a higher level of Zoom. And that's kind of the model with every one of these, is that there's a base level where you get access for free or pretty cheap, and then a lot of functionality gets added. My feeling is that you're going to want to, you got to know what your needs are and what your limits are. And I think you have to go just above the bare minimum. I mean, the bare minimum is going to get you in trouble at the wrong time. And if there's one thing that I would not skimp on, and this goes a little bit back to Cindy's, don't skimp on high-speed internet. Have the absolute best possible pipe you can be, especially if you're hosting the meeting. If others who are coming in maybe are a little bit lower, they can shut their video off and get a better streaming, but do not skimp on internet. And then if you're going to be using Zoom or Teams as your primary platform for interacting with larger groups of people or multiple groups of people, I would go with a little bit higher level service and get to know some of the other functionality beyond just what we're doing here, which is literally the very basic functionality in these tools.
And so back to Cindy's question, that would be your suggestion for the best way to do away with the freeze aspect is the higher speed.
Have a good pipe. Have a good pipe for you as the primary speaker, and then any participants, they can adjust by shutting off their video or that kind of thing, but you should have a really good pipe. And it's the unsung hero Yeah, I've seen presentations and I've seen big events over the past couple of months crash, not because of computer CPU power, but because of a bad pipe.
Yeah, yeah, that does make perfect
Not
sense.
the time to do Wi-Fi from your basement.
Right, right. I myself had to get a net extender this summer because we
Mhm.
had my son going to school. We had, and doing online classes and, working at home. And so that makes perfect sense. And so what do you think what about security concerns
Ooh,
with these platforms?
yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
From our security concerns, the security concerns haven't changed. We as a small to medium sized businesses, again, we still ensure we have a secure, safe, passcode protected Wi-Fi, and we ensure that computers have firewalls and antivirus software. Again, we're not sharing a lot of the legal or financial documents on these platforms. We're not sharing the screens much as you email the secure document or the confidential document to the other party, and then you can discuss it and not having it on the platform. That's kind of what has been our practice with, how much do we trust it? How much do we utilize it? I think there is a lot of more room to utilize it, but we still don't trust that a lot of financial or trusted documents would be, shared over the platforms.
Yeah.
Excuse me while I dropped my pen.
That's
There's a big issue here that has to be dealt with regard to the combination of security and storage with using these cloud-based collaboration tools. Think about this: when you weren't doing that cloud-based collaboration and you were using your desk, your hard drive on your computer, or maybe an external drive, or maybe you had some sort of a server you were storing stuff to, you had a basic file structure and you were storing stuff in places where it was supposed to go. You were putting the socks in the right drawer, the t-shirts in the right drawer, et cetera, and so on. What we're seeing now with Teams is you got lots and lots and lots of places you could put a document. You can drop it into chat. You can put it in the files. You can put it up on the cloud there, or you can put it in someone's personal OneDrive. You can put it in the enterprise OneDrive. You can put it on the server. Now people are storing stuff in multiple places. And that's a big, big issue when you're talking about protecting IP, when you're talking about security, and when you're talking about access. And so what we need people to do, and that's a key part of all of this, in addition to this technology, is there's got to be training with this. People need to understand that cloud isn't just throwing a document up into the ether and having it there in perpetuity. It's up there somewhere, and you need to know where it is. And that gets even more complex when you have your cloud environment. You say, I'm going to store all my documents here, but you're working on a client. And the client says, well, we have a Teams channel. Let's store it on our stuff as well. Well, do you want all your stuff being stored on a client's team channel? Or is there stuff that should be partitioned? It's got a whole different set of policies.
Yeah, you raise a very good point. And then we are all using our computers for our personal stuff too. And so then that's
absolutely. IT policies are really, really getting fuzzy right now when home and work are pretty much one and the same.
Yeah, exactly.
And not to mention school, right?
Exactly, right. And then, so how do you keep up your hardware with the software? That's, we kind of all went home in March with our laptops, right? And now we're finding, I know myself personally, I work on a Mac, and every couple of weeks I'm getting the message that, my startup drive is full. And so how do we keep up with that?
Well, ideally, cloud should help you because you're actually alleviating some of the burden on your internal storage, which helps with performance. Cloud-based applications means that there's a very small, thin application on your computer, and most of the application is in the cloud. But not if you're duplicating. If you're copying everything to your desktop and also keeping it in the cloud, or you've got the wrong kind of application, or you've got a slow internet pipe, well, then that's all going to drain. Ideally, if we're using these tools properly and optimizing them, it has less of a drain on your hardware resources. Ideally.
And what do people do? This particularly, Steve, the smaller and medium-sized businesses who don't have IT people, and so they're kind of trying to figure it out all on their own. Particularly as far as their hardware is going, and keeping that up and making sure that it's still working for them and that it's secure.
Yep. Very, very good question, Joanna. That's one of the challenges, IT and IT support, and access to IT and access to affordable IT support is the challenge for a lot of the small businesses. And in storing on the cloud has been the habit prior to the pandemic for a lot of our businesses. And how do you optimize it? According to Matt, definitely you need some direction. And when those laptops starts performing or underperforming, a lot of times the problem is you're duplicating the storage between storing it on the cloud and storing it on your hard drive, which is basically what we discovered in our business that was a lot of the staff doing. So, but for the retail and hospitality businesses, there isn't an influx of new software that is relevant for the day-to-day operations of the business, especially during the pandemic. At the core of the retail and hospitality product and service delivery, there are operational platforms that haven't really changed due to the pandemic. You have the point of sale, we call it a POS. Point of sale system is to conduct a sales transaction, and the backside of the POS basically order the product and services, track the transaction, and typically the inventory and other planning needs. So the businesses haven't really changed their need for their hardware because the point of sales, the way they process their orders, the way they process the day-to-day business hasn't changed. But yes, at the office level, at the staff level, yes, you have that challenge. And maybe Matt, if you have some suggestions or know someone in this market that can be a good IT service, affordable IT service for small businesses, I think we should share it.
That's actually really important, Steve. There are actually some really fantastic outsourced IT players now that serve small businesses. In fact, I think some of them are even chamber members where their specialty is to provide fractional IT support to, a 5 to 10 person company who doesn't want to keep that IT person on staff full time, nor should they. There's some really, really good players out there, and they're really reasonable. They're flexible, and by the way, in this kind of environment, they're even more effective in terms of what they can do. So I can certainly provide some. Another great resource to this is MinTech, the former Minnesota High Tech Association. There's some really, really good members there that do that.
Good. Well, that's a good pointer. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And so, what about, we talked about internet speed. What about, your employees who are working at home, working remotely, and they are competing with that with their family members? I mentioned my son, and, we got a net extender this summer, and finally everything was right with his world. He was able to game while I was working, all of that. But how is that working with your employees working remotely and all the competition that is going on with their home bandwidth?
Well, I can speak, Joanne, from our business, we felt there was an obligation to cover a better speed or the additional cost of having a high-speed internet because it kind of service the business while the staff is working from home. So we were able to make some cuts in different areas of expenses and make some room to reimburse or cover the cost of additional speed for our staff. And that's been really, really helpful. I think that's the only solution at this point is just to participate in covering the additional cost or maybe the whole cost if possible. But that has worked. That has helped us a lot.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
We haven't done much reimbursement of high-speed internet. It's a good point, Steve. We've had prior to the pandemic some situations where we had people working remote who made the decision to work remote, and by the way cut several $100s off their commute costs and reapplied that to high-speed internet. It absolutely is something to pay attention to. And like I said, if there's one thing I wouldn't skimp on, it's high-speed internet, because you've got school and you've got your work going at the same time. Should be most of those services, US Internet and Comcast and such, should be able to accommodate those. There may be times when you might have to say, okay, kids, you got to stay off because I've got a big video conference. Or don't be downloading, 15 minutes of a high-res video, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when homework's done.
Right.
But there does have to be some coordination. I think the other thing that needs to happen is we need to check out and get away from this stuff sometimes. We did a staff meeting this morning, a training session for an hour with like 50 people, and I think maybe 10 of them were actually on video. Some people just need to shut that camera off and not feel like they have to use every sense at that point. Or, hey, how about eventually just pick up the phone and have a good old phone call for a change? So
Well,
there is a need to take some breaks.
and that leads me right into my next question is how do you deal with, employee well-being? Because I think you're absolutely right. There are times where I was just talking about this with some colleagues yesterday. We do have this tool and Zoom and Teams, and they're great tools. And we're so fortunate in this day that we have this, and it's enabled us all to continue our work in whatever capacity we're able to do that. But, I used to do phone calls, and now they're Teams meetings, and it is, this constant video and sitting in front of a screen is exhausting. And so what our speaker yesterday had a great tip, and it was a not to do list.
Mm-hmm.
And but how are you helping your employees through that? I think, having a staff meeting and not everyone being on Zoom is brilliant. How are you helping your employees to maintain their sanity, whatever of it they had beforehand?
Joanne, the hospitality industry is muted right now. It's not a lot going on, so we don't have that problem.
Yeah.
I wish I can say we have that problem, that we're on so many meetings and planning so many events, and everyone is engaged, but our industry is kind of on hold until things open back up. But we deal with it with every, I deal with it personally with every team member. Like the technology platform is like any other aspect of the business. We address it as needed and talk directly with each team member on their needs and understanding as it relates to their role on a team. So if there is, for someone else I can cover, we're all, in our industry wearing multiple hats right now, doing multiple tasks and covering different roles. So we give each other's break, and this industry, our industry, I'm speaking on behalf of my industry, of the hospitality industry, this industry is united, it's working together, we're helping each other more than ever, and we're reaching out. So I think we cover each other's back, and if someone needs a break, we are capable of covering that gap.
We have to recognize that this environment is maybe not causing us to work longer hours, but we're working much more intensely.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like we're walking the same speed in the treadmill, but we're on an incline.
Yes.
I mean, even just think about this panel. If Steve and I and Joanne, you were sitting in chairs next to each other carrying on this conversation, the energy and the amount of energy and intensity would be much different than what we're doing right now.
Absolutely.
And we have to recognize that, and we have to incorporate use of technology with thinking about mental health, thinking about teaching our teams mindfulness, thinking about, when can people take those 15-minute breaks, or, what, maybe it's not a good idea for you to be in front of this thing for 4 hours. Maybe you need to get 15-minute breaks here and there, get some physical exercise, go and hop on the treadmill, do some things to kind of get away from it as much as you can as well.
Yeah, and we don't have that travel time in between meetings, right? We used to be able to book a meeting from 1 to 2, and then we knew that we had to from 2.
I miss my commute.
Yes.
I'm an introvert, and that half hour in the morning and half an hour in the evening was my decompress time. Now my decompress time is 5 stairs.
Right. I don't tell anybody. I told you all this, but at the beginning of the pandemic, when my son was here going to school and my husband had been laid off, and we were all here in what we thought of was a fairly large house, all of a sudden the walls became so much smaller. I found myself at the end of my workday, because I didn't have that commute, there was no transition from working to home. I just opened up my office door. I started taking about 15 or 20 minutes, keeping my door closed, turning my computer off, and even reading a book, or even if it was just watching the news or listening to the radio, just to have that downtime. So I know exactly what you mean. And so I wonder, on the other side of this, whenever we get to the other side and we hear the stories of, Steve, your business is so different, but, we hear the stories that Target's not even thinking about coming back until the end of July. I think that work will be changed. What's going to happen at that? We've become accustomed to now using these platforms. How do we transition beyond this if we're able, or will this always be a piece of have we changed forever the way that we work?
Joanne, I don't think we have changed the way we conduct business. I think the in-person meetings and the one-on-one interactions are still needed and essential in our day-to-day doing business. Absolutely, there has been a change, and the way we do business or the way we office is going to be impacted for many centuries to come because of what we experienced recently. But I believe as things go back to normal or to prior to March, we will go back to conduct business as usual, but a lot of the corporations or businesses will still utilize those platforms a lot more than they did in the past because they realized it's more helpful, it's reduced the cost. But again, for mental health, for the sake of humanity, we need to go back and see each other and shake hands and cut deals at the table. We can't just keep doing it over the platforms. The traditional way of doing business will never get old or changed. I believe it will get modified a little bit, but it will go back to the round tables and then do business around round tables.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a case where we're not going to become a virtual company, but we're going to become a company that allows people to work virtually. And there's going to be definitely, we want people to come back to the office, but it's going to be different. So think about right now, I'm at home. And I have to go, I started going back to the office a few months ago, a couple times a week, because my wife said I was being insufferable, which is true. So what I was doing is I pack up my stuff, I go to the office, and my setup in the office is exactly the same as my setup here. So what am I doing? What I see us doing is changing the idea of what it means to go to the office and why. We're going to go to the office when we need to have that human interaction. But going to the office to actually work by ourselves, I think there's going to be less of that. But think about our offices being a little bit more like the airline lounge, where everybody's together in open areas, they're working together. And if you need a place to go, you can go, but primarily you're going there to interact with people. And so I do see us getting back to that. However, there are some technology changes that were accelerated because of the pandemic that businesses have been wanting to do for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of the digitization of the menu in restaurants and some of the e-commerce platforms that retailers have scrambled to put in place, they kind of wanted to do those before, and now they're there.
Sure.
So that's great. Telehealth. I mean, you talk to our wonderful, robust healthcare community. They've been wanting telehealth for the past 5 years, but patients wouldn't do it. Now patients are doing it, and they're going, "Hey, this is all right."
Yes.
So those kinds of things that we've been trying to usher in, those will stick. But I agree with Steve, human interaction and carbon to carbon contact. I mean, oh man, I can't wait to give someone a hug.
Isn't that the truth?
And I'm not a hugger, you know?
I am. I really can't.
Isn't it weird these days to give someone a hug?
Exactly.
I don't know about you, but I even watch TV and I see people hugging. It could be a show that was recorded, 10 years ago. And I'm like, what are you doing? Oh yeah, that's right. It's a 10-year-old show. So, it's like, it is funny. Well, this has been such a great and robust conversation. And I want to open it up. I don't know if any of our participants have questions, but we do have some time still. And so if you do have questions, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to put it into the chat. Is there anything that either one of you, Steve or Matt, are thinking of that you want to make sure and talk about that we haven't touched base on today? This is such an important topic, and we're still a ways from the end, and so it's important that we know what's out there and what's working. So am I forgetting anything, not asking about anything, not including anything?
Well, Murray's calling me out as a hugger. Murray, next time I see you at an event, I'm gonna hit you up with a big one, maybe even a kiss on the forehead. One thing that I would say is I think incredibly important is don't forget the human factor. Every one of these technologies that we're talking about and these enabling tools has a human element to it. And just because it exists and the tool is there doesn't mean A, people are going to embrace it and use it, and B, doesn't mean they should be using it all the time. So we have to be really deliberate about making sure that there's a human factor tied to it. And oftentimes there's a policy or a procedure or process tied to it as well. And oftentimes we have to unravel bad behavior because we put a technology into people's hands without giving them guidance on the right way to use it.
You mentioned something, Matt, that did bring a question to my mind, and the word was policy. And do you have a formal policy at Padilla? And Steve, do you have a policy, or is it kind of, kind of put pieced together?
We have millennials, so we don't have policies anymore. We have guidelines.
Got it.
But it's important for us to have them because they provide some clarity in how to do things and prevent chaos from happening. Without that kind of guidance, people kind of do what they think is right or what they think is easy, which is natural. But at the end of the day, the long-term implications aren't there. Policies and processes are in place to prevent mistakes.
And so do you have policies and like as far as where documents are stored and what platform is used in what instance and then those kinds of guidelines?
We have to update ours,
okay.
particularly related to document storage.
Okay.
Big time. Yeah, it's an area that's got to be addressed.
What about you, Steve? What do you think?
I completely agree with Matt. These policies and guidelines are needed to help staff stay on track, have them directed to avoid mistakes. Things have been changing so fast, so quick for us. I would, don't lie to you, don't have the policies I wish I have in place. I think we need more of these webinars, more of these education sessions to kind of decide what is the best policy to have in such period of time where the pandemic, which is a new word to us, has changed the way we do business, and we're educating ourselves and our staff. What is the best policy? You might think today a policy is good, but tomorrow it's not going to be good and valid. So that's why, as business owners, we're obligated and to keep ourselves educated, trained, informed of all the different changes, so we can put in place a policy that serves the business and be fair to the employees. Because at the same time, we don't want the employees to be taken advantage of or feel they're not being productive, however they are, and doing their best to give your business the best they can in this time.
And so talking about the employees brings to mind, this question that Cindy has asked in the Q&A. She says that she misses the face-to-face interaction in team building and interactive work teams, and is wondering if anyone has found other ways to do it, and if you can talk a little bit about using break rooms.
Yeah, the first part of your question, Anna's question, we don't have the right answer. We're doing the best we can with what we have. We're doing small group meetings. We're taking the time out to have conversations about things other than work, even though it's, we start our meeting at 2 and we could get right into it. We're trying to leave that first 5 minutes at the beginning to just let people kind of take a deep breath. It's a bit challenging. There are cases where we're getting together for coffee with masks out on a porch. And just, where we have a great, it's harder now, but we have a great office near Gold Medal Park, and a team gets together and has a picnic, and we're all more than 6 feet apart. We're trying to do as much as we can there. As far as a bit about break rooms, I'm not sure if you're talking about break rooms or you're talking about what I mentioned earlier, which is breakout rooms in Zoom. Might be what she's referring to. If that's the case, Zoom has some features where you can actually have a big group meeting like this, but then you can depart out into breakout rooms for small group interaction and then come back to the big one. And that works really nice for workshop-y kind of sessions.
Yep, absolutely. Steve, what you need to do is use the kitchen and have a great big,
I'm all for that.
Everywhere, and have great big bonfires. And, there's your next business opportunity. And I know you're probably already on that. So
the outdoor gatherings is going to be the first events to happen, I would say, as a first stage of gatherings. It will be outdoors, and absolutely people like us are basically getting prepared, having options for our clients to provide them, with options to gather or host meetings or get together in the outdoors as soon as that, things are we allowed to do it actually.
Are you the person that bought out all the outdoor heaters from Amazon so that nobody else can get them?
From Amazon and the rest of the world, yes, we did.
Because those are a very hard thing to find these days. This has been very helpful. I've learned a lot today, and I don't think we have any other questions, so we might just give everyone back some time today, and we can all use this to commute commute to your next meeting, whatever
Or
that
go
may
to the
be.
bathroom before our next meeting, right?
Exactly. That's the other problem with these back-to-backs is we don't have that time anymore. Thank you so much, Steve and Matt. We really appreciate your being here today. And what you've taught us a lot, and it's been very helpful. So thank you so
Pleasure
much.
being with both of you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.